we got it. Man, it's really hard to use a mouse really far away from your. All right, thanks, Kristen. So, yeah, I'm Pam, and we have Starfire here again. We don't have Starfire at the organization, but we have Tim and Bridget here for the fourth and final session with us.
By this year.
Yeah. 2023. So, and I think you're gonna give kind of like a synopsis of our learning from the last 3 sessions, because I don't know, have you guys come to the other sessions that they were here for? You haven't. You're a brand new face for me.
I came to the last session, but I think David ran that
Yeah.
one. I think it was-
She brings everybody.
I know, yeah, that's cool. And then you were here last.
Yeah.
Very good, yes. So this will be cool. This will be new for you guys too. And then to get us started, because today a lot of our conversation, a lot of our work is directed towards community building and like, what are we doing that's out that's really getting connected and getting to know the people around us and kind of doing some small projects where you get your community together. I don't know, I'd say neighborhood, but we're living kind of in a place. Are you guys all from like Franklin County, or you coming to us from Fairfield County? You're in Fairfield, okay. So it's kind of a mix between the rural and, you know, a more neighborhood driven space. But how are you guys working together and getting to know each other and just making that a place that you want to live? And so we brought Alex to come and give us some. She's had a couple of different experiences with two different communities, yet similar in some ways. But Alex is a friend of mine. She's a local artist, and we have a local arts group that gets together. It's called Fathom Arts Consortium. And so it's not a disability only group. It's not an ADS. It's just a community arts organization that supports local artists. And so that's how I met Alex. She's phenomenally talented. And that's for real, Alex. I'm not just saying that. And oh, I said I was going to be over here, didn't I? I'm sorry. Right, but I'm not there. And she is parts of, like, you belong to lots of communities. I think that's what we were talking about. So like the artist community, the queer community, the disability community, but then importantly, the Lancaster's community, right? As a whole. And so if you would chat with us a little bit about, you grew up in, where did you grow up? Wait a minute, you're gonna have to unmute. Maybe not.
My bad.
There you are.
I was just muting because I don't know, I didn't want to make a bunch of noise.
all good.
Yeah, I lived in Perry County in Thornville. Like I grew up there my whole life. And when I was 28, I figured out how to move and live independently. And I thought Lancaster was a great place because it's not Columbus where I might be lost in the system, and it's not rural like Thornville where there's barely a system. So it's honestly been really great for me.
So you called this a metropolis when we were talking. You were like, it was the great
Practically, compared to where I lived before.
yeah. What was the best part of living in Thornville and in that small community? Was there anything great about it?
To me, it was hard. You know, I don't know. I guess I didn't really fit in ever, but I found community online. That's where I really thrived. But I could always escape online and
Yeah.
find my people.
So then you moved here, and what have you found here? What's it been like to live in Lancaster?
Well, I was really into like integrating myself into the community and just like living my life the way I imagine my adult life to be. And honestly, I've done a great job in that. And Lancaster has allowed me to do that. Because, you know, I've tried before, it failed. Because before I would find my people in Columbus, but that's an hour drive.
Yeah.
And does everyone want to drive me there? No. You just can't do that. Um, but here it's like what 5 minutes away to something I can go to. There's always something going on in the community. There's always an event here or there. Like, and of course, Fathom is huge in that for me. A consistent community that I can go to and meet new people and make friends, see the same people. Of course, Pam. And her whole family is awesome.
They don't have a choice. I just bring them everywhere I go.
Yep, they will be there and they'll like it.
And they'll love it, is what you meant. Yeah, so
Perfect.
cool. So then, and you've had a couple of pieces in different shows, but when we were talking about things that you wanted more of and to do that you haven't really got a chance to do locally, and to back this up, one of the cool things is when you first moved here, it was last Halloween, you were like, I want to pass out candy for trick or treat. Never
Yeah.
had that opportunity to pass out candy. Like, where can I go do that? And you live in an apartment complex where I would think there would be a lot of people that would want candy. However, what's your what kind of neighbors do you have?
Oh, my neighbors are, well, I live in an apartment that's subsidized, so it's based on your income, and it's primarily for seniors. But there are like 5 apartments total set aside for people who are disabled but not old. Like I think the cutoff is like 60 something, 60. I don't know what the age is. I didn't focus on that, but I I managed to make it into this apartment miraculously. Because housing for us is almost impossible and honestly a dream for most.
Yeah, we
And as
talked
far
about
as
that.
trick or treat, uh, yeah, I'm sure everyone here would love to do that. But I mean, I think they have to leave and go out and do that. I think it happens more in town.
Yeah, for sure. We have lots of trick or treaters. You're always welcome to come over and
Yeah.
pass them out at our house for sure. Although yeah, we'll talk more about that, but my kids are
Yeah.
getting to the age where they didn't trick or treat and now they're back to getting back to that. Maybe we don't trick or treat anymore. That's what happens when you grow up.
No.
All right. So something you want more of that you and out of this community that you haven't gotten yet, or that you like, what's a goal or a dream or something new that you want to do?
Mm, well, I guess we discussed transportation being something I would love to see improvements in.
Sure.
I guess
then-
because what?
I was gonna say, and art was the other thing that you talked about, having some aspirations with that.
Yeah, what did I say?
Well, so also Alex is a graphic designer, so she works for a company and that's something that she's able to do from the comfort of her own home. She doesn't have to go into an office or anything. It's but having an actual physical art show, you said you would really like to do that. I can make that
I
dream
would,
come
of course.
true.
I mean, there's Fathom. So I know that I can have art in a show. I know that that's something I can do. So
Mhm.
I was gonna focus on something maybe I can't do currently. I mean, I am gonna focus on trying to get like a 1-person show. I've done the group shows, which are awesome. But yeah, it's a little hard for me to like, transfer my art to a physical form. A lot of it's digital, and then the physical art is like tiny because I can control like this space.
Yeah.
So a lot of it turns into digital, and I finish it there. Um, shoot, what else was I gonna say?
I don't know. I think you said great stuff.
Transportation.
Transportation, yeah. Was there anything you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I've had some good experiences and bad experiences, but it is difficult if you want to get to an appointment, a medical appointment. you are able to do that with Medicaid. And I think, I mean, that was a pretty easy process. A little confusing because, I mean, you can submit your info online and then they call you back eventually. There's still one appointment I need a transportation for, but they never called me back after submitting my info. I'm thinking maybe they'll call me back closer to the appointment. I don't know. It's a mystery.
We'll see.
We'll see. We'll see if I can make it there. And if I want to go somewhere for my own enjoyment, say I want to go to a restaurant, I don't know, anything. And maybe it's after 5 o'clock. I can't. Because recreational use after 5 o'clock is not possible. And what if I want to go to, say my van's not working, and that's very viable because my van is old and breaks down. Well, possible, not viable, but yeah, so I've experienced that and I can't go to this or that, and I can't,
Mhm.
and I would have to plan on not having a vehicle and call and schedule that like a week ahead. So you know, you can't just get a ride.
Yeah, stuff
Um,
that we take for granted, I think, right? Like, and you have a
Yeah,
van,
like
like you have your own vehicle,
I do, and that's something most people don't have,
right?
even though it does break down. It
Yeah,
is old,
when
and
it's
I need a new
working.
one. So you know, it's not always there.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
And we talked about like people in your lives is being there to be able to help you with some of those things. So having other friends and people like outside of the disability world and outside your family that are there that can maybe help fill in when the system does not work for you, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
Otherwise, a lot of things wouldn't be possible.
For sure. Yeah. Well, does anybody else have any things they would like to have Alex share about, or do we wanna? I think you did awesome, Alex.
Thank you.
I know. We had this conversation. She was like, just keep me from rambling for about an hour and a half. So I think you did awesome. And there's so much more to talk about. We had a long conversation and I only scratched the surface. So I know I'll get to chat more with Alex.
Pam, is
but-
there anything else she wants us to know?
Jane, is there anything else you want us to know?
I guess I could ramble about housing. I always can.
I know you can. What about
Yeah.
something you can want us to know about? Well, what would be if you could not ramble about housing, but do it in like
Okay.
a 30-second elevator speech? I know, a minute and a half elevator speech about housing. What would you want people to know about?
That it's almost impossible to, if you're young and you're disabled, severely disabled, and you need care all the time, it's pretty much a dream, a fantasy to live by yourself, like I'm doing. Because I know this because my boyfriend is in the same place, but he can't get out of his parents' house. His parents are aging. He can't, you know, you've got to get care somehow. And that's just impossible, you know, like a lot of these apartments only have 4 or 5 apartments available for people like us in our demographic. It's a weird demographic to be in, and it's something that is overlooked over and over again.
So I looked up Schrodinger's cat because you said that.
Yes.
I thought that was an interest. Do you guys know about Schrodinger's cat? All right, of course you do, Tim. Does anybody else know about? I didn't, but I thought that was a really interesting concept that you said your friend said about that, as far as like you're either not disabled enough or you're too disabled, but you're everything all at the same time until somebody
Yep.
determines which one you are,
Yep.
right? Yeah, which I thought
Yep.
was pretty interesting. All right, Alex. Well, you can either stick around and continue to listen to all this awesomeness, or you can do much cooler things probably at your house, which
Yeah.
you can
Before-
decide.
Before she goes, Pam, could we just, one of the things we like to do is just, Alex, give an affirmation. Things that you all heard Alex said that matter to you. So it's a way of giving back, right? So Alex, one thing, for example, I appreciate the quote, finding my people. And I really
Okay.
think that that's a helpful thing to remember, that it's an ongoing process. I also appreciated you naming the compromises that people are forced into. I think that that's a helpful reminder. This is sometimes we get tricked into thinking that that's what people choose, but they're choosing from a menu that is pretty limited. So
Yes.
thanks for
The
naming that.
menu has one item on it and they're ordering it.
Yep. So if anybody else has any other affirmations for Alex, that'd be great.
Hi, Alex. I'm Ann Weissent. I work with the Ohio Department of Developmental Disabilities. So first of all, I want to thank you for sharing your story today with this group. I think the one thing that was super important for me to hear from you was just your experience around how important it is to make those community connections. And as we work with providers and direct support professionals and people interested in becoming direct support professionals, I think we have to do a better job of helping them understand their role in supporting individuals to make those connections in the community. Tim and I were just talking, and I've been in the field for 32 years. And I remember coming in as a direct support professional and then as a supervisor of direct support professionals and saying to my team 30 years ago, our job is to work ourselves out of a job, because if we are helping people make those connections in the community, they won't need paid supports or folks to do kind of those routine things for them. So thank you for making sure that we understand that's still a priority for people with lived experience.
Awesome.
Hi, Ann, I'm Sarah. I'm the Center Director for Act Day in Pickerington. I thought everything that you shared with us was really beneficial, but the one thing that stood out to me was a sentence that you actually said, and you said, so that I can live adult life in the way that I pictured it. And I think it's profound that that was such a basic sentence, but it has so much meaning, because I think everyone in this room as an adult gets to live their adult life in the way that they picture it. And I think just that one piece gave me the opportunity as a provider to think, okay, are we making sure that our members that are participating are living their adult life the way they picture it? So thank you for that perspective.
Awesome.
Once, going twice.
I appreciate it. I don't think you can see me, Alex, but I think you said something about, just a consistent community and having a, sort of that rhythm of you can show up and see the same people and how important that is. I think that's a real Fathom is a gift, right? To you and a lot of other people who can show up and find that. So appreciate that.
Awesome.
Thanks, Alex.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right, I got it. You want me to go?
When you do whatever you want.
Okay. All
Alex,
right, bye.
all right.
Okay.
Yeah, we're done. You're up. This is you.
Yeah, Krista back at the.
Yeah.
So for those of you guys, I'm Bridget, for those that haven't been here or seen us, and we like to get things started with conversation, because we think that's where we all can share our own wisdom and experiences. And we know you have that, you have your own wisdom and experience, so that chance to share with each other and kind of process all the things that are going on and bring some of that into the room. So we're going to start with just a quick conversation. You can do it in pairs, you can go by 3, whatever, probably fine. Math, I don't know. Looks like 3s would work, maybe. So if you want to be in a group of 3, so you can find a group of 3 and talk about a place in your community that feels alive. So we're going to break up, talk about that. What makes it feel that way? What does it mean to you? Those questions. So shift those chairs, move those wheels.
It's fast, 6 minutes.
Oh, okay. Go ahead. I'll do fours, let's do 4.
We're breaking all your rules.
On that.
Lost complete
Oh.
control.
We've been doing.
Ruined.
Just in general,
It is good, right? I guess you wanna go.
Right, got like 1 more minute to wrap that up.
Columbus, or whatever. I used to live in the country, and I was so. I was so, I mean, I had a sound bath, I had MIDI, I had all the things, and then we like, because we're on like a crossroad and it just, and so. Even just when I thought that was an experience was gonna be, it's.
I saw that. It's like, oh,
I go to other places, or.
Yeah.
But it's funny that even for us, it's been having a kid that has met people, like, I don't know half of that, like, I don't know, I would know most of them that I know, had it not been like, oh, we went to daycare together, or, oh, we walked to the farmer's market every morning and sitting at 7 a.m. the following week. Like, I probably would have done at 9, like, just all the things that, so then how do you find that thing that gets you going into this?
okay, so if you guys don't mind wrapping that up. And sharing a bit with all of us what you've heard, we do have gift cards, so a chance, so those of you, we'll put, if you share something, we'll put your, which I guess we should have started before. You have plenty of time, sir, the chances for the gift cards.
It's not too late.
No, it's not too late. All right, so what did you hear about some of those places? What are some of the places you heard from the people in your group and what they mean?
So in our group, there were a couple of things that kind of came up. 3 of the 4 of us had situations where we had relocated, so we had to create a new sense of community and find new places that make us feel alive.
Yeah.
I was the outsider who's been in my community for, a million years. I won't say how many. And so we talked a little bit about the differences of recreating community and then redefining community when you've been there for a long time. And then the second thing was that whether it is a physical place that you call a community, or whether it is a more conceptual connection of people, those are both communities. And they both, some of the similarities on how they made us feel was, they made us feel safe, they made us feel connected. They had, of course, a lot of meaning to us because it really kind of connected some of our multiple purposes. So some of us had interest in, the foodie community, some of us in the arts community. But then, one of the examples was taking that interest in the foodie community and figuring out a way to develop a place to employ people with developmental disabilities, bringing together communities. And so anyway, we had a really big conversation.
Yeah,
Very
you
short
covered a lot of
time.
questions there. Good work.
6 minutes.
That was.
Hey, we were efficient with that time.
But so one of the things you guys said, so moving into a new place, you kind of have to, you're on a search and you're very aware of looking for it and being on the lookout and trying to find those places that already exist. But you also, I think, spoke to redefining, even if you've lived there for even if you've been in a place for a long time, sometimes there's a need to redefine or rediscover something else, something's missing.
Or create what's missing.
And sometimes it's not there.
Yeah.
And it's up to you or whoever you can find to make that with you. I think that's beautiful. Yeah, love it. What else did you guys? Anybody want to share overview?
Well, we had, lots of people said lots of things, but I was thinking when Joe was talking, because it reminded me of myself too, but he said that he came from Ghana. And there's a difference in the idea of the community he came from, where you just went to people's homes, and said, hey, what's going on? You just went there without saying like, hey, are you home? Can I come over? Like, coordinating it first. So that's much different now, but that's very alive to him. And then just talking about like, what, is there anything here that kind of reminds him of that feeling? He's just being out in nature and being able to walk. And you said sing too, right? Did you say sing? I thought you did, yeah. Singing while he's walking out on the paths and in the parks and such. It's just
So some things are created and man-made and, building. But sometimes just being out in a space and that's alive and that's there. And usually it's the people involved or what you're doing that kind of bring it more alive. But it could be anywhere. It's interesting to think about the difference in people's homes and the privacy nature of our world.
Even your daughter, is that what you said? You're gonna call my daughter even before I can deliver, yeah.
Right, it's a fun, it's interesting to hear the differences of how, you know, certain worlds,
Yeah.
are different. Okay.
All right, well, thank you all for that. Places, places, places. Hold on to those, because we use them a little bit. Ready, Kristen? We're gonna try to buzz through the last 3 sessions. We'll see, this is gonna be warp speed. Gonna be wonderful, man. We started session 1 with this chart. So what we're looking at is a story around disability that continues to be one of separation, right? That people with developmental disabilities typically have some family in their life, but over time that family dwindles. They've got a lot of paid people in their lives, and those paid people are like us. They are, some of them awesome, like all of us in the room, some of them who rotate in and out and change over, and some of them who even are concerned, maybe even dangerous, stealing somebody's money, putting them in restraining holds. But the idea is that they're there to help, but they're hired guns. We are hired guns, right? And that they face a significant social absence around neighbors and community. Okay, and we'll talk about that, why that's happening in a second. And that then they are always surrounded by people who share the label of disability. As Alex said, this is the menu. And this is all I get to order, right? Because somebody's ordering it for me. So really, this is a picture of the economy around our system. These people are paid to take care of these people in big groups. The more big the groups can be, the more efficient we can be with we can impact more people, we can serve more people, and we can also bill more hours, right? So we started to be disrupted at Starfire around this question of who's going to be in the lives of people with developmental disabilities if their parents aren't. And that started to ask us the question of how might we fill up the bottom part of this graph. So one of the things we got into did I touch it? Would that do
I don't
something?
think so.
Yeah.
I did.
The side arrow.
I did.
Oh.
Yep.
Oh, there you go. There's your, yeah.
It's on the-
So it gave us, yeah, it gave us a lot of uncomfortable questions. Is this a life I would want? And everybody in this room at the time in February said, I wouldn't want a segregated life. Has anything changed over the past, say, 30 years? And the answer was a little bit better, but for the most part, this is still the picture. And a lot of families and people with disabilities will say, yeah, still my story. Did our work perpetuate loneliness and social isolation? I'm chuckling, but this is the gut question, right? And it hurts, but we did ourselves at Starfire say, yeah, we're part of a system that actually perpetuated loneliness. And then the biggest question, the most hopeful one, is what is our responsibility here? So that gives us a little bit of a challenge. So before you get into what to do about it, it's helpful to know why it's happening. And we kind of have 3 things that we think is going on. One is, next, Kristen, will be path dependence. So we're stuck in a pattern that people invented hundreds and hundreds of years ago, maybe even thousands of years ago. So we use the image of the typewriter. The QWERTY keyboard is on a typewriter from 200 years ago. It's still on your phone to this very day for absolutely no reason. We're just used to it, right? So we are used to people with developmental disabilities are over there in that building, in that program, in that special needs design thing. We also are kind of dependent on it financially. So the billing system actually depends on as many people in a group as possible, right? So I use the example that when I was running the day program at Starfire, I was billing $7 a person a day. And if I lumped 5 people together, I could bill $35 a day. If I ran a shop where I could put 20 people in a room, I could bill per day, I said per hour, $7 a person per hour times 5 people in a group, $35 an hour. If I ran a workshop, I could bill, say, 20 people in a room, and I'm billing $140 an hour, right? So the finances are actually dictating this business model. We could say, let's take this one person out by themselves and discover their deepest purpose. Go visit the places in their community that we think matter to them. That's $7 an hour I can bill. Or I could take all 6 or 10 of these people bowling, right? And all of a sudden I filled a bunch of people's time. So there's some historical kind of business models and legacy financial pressures that we're under. So we're stuck in a rut, and that's how we pay the bills. And then this last thing is a little bit heartbreaking. It's not just about being stuck and being kind of, dependent on it financially. It's also that there's something going on in our culture that looks at human beings with disabilities in a way that devalues them. Okay. So we got into that and we started to think about, well, let's look at this idea of a good life. What does it mean? So we listed it out here: sense of belonging, choice, standard of living, education, home, family, love and relationships, all the things everybody wants, ability to contribute. And in order to get a lot of that good stuff, those good things in life, we need to have strong social roles. Alex is an artist, right? Tim is a presenter. Pam is in an association, right? You talk about all the different things. We have family, we have friends, we have neighbors, we have belonging to a faith community. The more of those kind of social roles we have, in a positive sense, the better chances are we have a good life. We also have negative social roles where people might just be a client of Starfire or a developmentally disabled person who is stuck in a day program at Starfire. Those are negative social roles where all of a sudden it's like, well, those people are all like each other, right? And so we have these societal values of who gets stuck in the negative and who gets to experience the positive, right? So some of the values are intelligence versus people that are seen as stupid or retarded, right? To use a word that is still used and shouldn't be, but we're going to name it. People are seen as powerful versus people are seen as weak. People that are seen as independent versus dependent on a system, right? People that are seen as strong and athletic versus feeble or clumsy. And we kind of named there's a danger in being seen on this side of that chart. So one of the things that we can start to get a hint of is, how do we help people who are in danger of seen this way, of starting to get some ability to be seen this way? And if we could invest in those positive aspects of somebody's identity and build that up and get them some positive social roles, we could give them a chance to get up here into some of that good life stuff. If we continue to tell the story that someone is in these negative societal values, we decrease their social roles, which gives them less chance of having a good life. Does that make sense? All right. It's okay. So we talked about this idea of devaluation, and it's happening all the time. It's an unconscious thing sometimes. It's different from not valuable. It's active. We actively don't want to be around people that make us look bad or that we feel diminish our own social status. And so we're constantly trying to surround ourselves with the cool kids, right? Everybody knows you do it, I do it. We want to be around successful people, pretty people. We want to be seen as valuable and worthy and loved and important. So one kind of devaluation, sorry, go back a second. One of the things that we noticed is one kind of devaluation is when one person devalues another. We're not talking about that. One person devalues a group of people. We're not talking about that. This is what we're talking about: a societal-wide devaluation of a group of people, and there's not many people that are supporting that person, right? So in this sense, this is a picture of slavery. This is a picture of the Holocaust. This is a picture of generations of women who weren't allowed to own property or vote. Any devalued group in our society by a larger, more empowered group is a social devaluation, and it's intolerable life circumstances is what it leads to. So we think this is what people with disabilities and their families are up against. Here's people with disabilities devalued by the society, and there's not a lot of people saying, wait a second, these people are really valuable members of the community. They're saying, who really cares? That's too expensive to get great transportation so that the artists can connect to each other. Or they're saying, I don't really know who's responsible for that. I think it's probably Starfire or Fairfield County or Active Day or whoever it is. I'm not really going to bother with it because it doesn't cost me anything to ignore these people, which is a form of devaluation. So we got into what does it look like for people with disabilities? And this is heartbreaking too. Go ahead. We talked about the fact that people are seen as dangerous. So that, oh boy, they could hurt me or my kids. Uh-oh. Or we got to protect them from society. So we're going to throw them away at, Pickerington Correctional Center, right? Where I know people with disabilities have gone. We said this is historical. So this is Cincinnati's problem from 1915, said it was the feeble-minded were the hub to our wheel of vice or crime or pauperism. This is a historical devaluation where we painted people with disabilities as violent, as criminal. And then that is still happening today in some senses, right? We talk about people being a burden, not just violence, but a burden on society. So this is from the Chicago Daily Tribune in 1917. It allowed us to step into eugenics as a country. So from the 1800s to the Holocaust, we were participating in this idea that we could weed out people who were defectives, according to this newspaper article, in the gene pool. And here's an article from CBS News in 2017. It says that Iceland is trying to get rid of Down syndrome. So I think they're down to 4 or so births per year of children with Down syndrome, intentionally trying to get that to 0, right? So this has happened historically, that people are seen as a burden, and that it's still happening today. Okay. We think that this is a really great thing, but actually objectifies people, and that people with disabilities are seen as a charity case or an object of other people's pity or ego, right? So I worked at a camp for people with disabilities, super proud of myself, happy to get all this affection and affirmation, not only from people with disabilities, but also their families, my colleagues, my family, my friends. You're an amazing person. Think about the patients of the saint. I could never do that, right? Oh, yes, tell me more, And then we come back and we do the fake touchdown for the kid in our school and never talk to him again. We do the get in at the end of the basketball game in your senior year and shoot a shot, and then we'll all celebrate you and never invite you to the cool thing to do. We'll go out and throw a big prom for you once a year, and we'll celebrate ourselves and take pictures of ourselves doing it. So the question is, who is all this charity for, right? If people aren't getting social media points or hits of dopamine from their friends saying this is awesome, would they even show up in the lives of people with disabilities? And are we treating people as objects, right? And is there something better? Similar to that, we've got this gift from God idea that we use people with disabilities to be heaven points so that God will bless us and allow us into the everlasting kingdom because we helped this poor person. So if you want to know if this is messed up, just ask yourself, put your name in that role. All right, here we go. Dear Heavenly Father, please bless me because I helped poor Pam today. How's that feel, Pam?
Not great.
Great. And God says, yes, Tim, you get in. Pam's so messed up, right?
I'll pay him though, she don't be there.
I don't want to talk about Pam. She's just there for everybody else, right? So it's a little bit weird. We've got this dynamic now. People are dangerous and they're a burden and they need our help. And God's going to bless us if we help them. But we really are, they're very alone. All right. And a lot of times people are seen as a patient. So some of the institutions around here and elsewhere, this is from Willowbrook, they actually use people with disabilities as guinea pigs for developing a hepatitis vaccine. So essentially they're saying, well, they're half dead anyway. Let's use their bodies to develop something that can save the rest of people, right? And that's not, it's still alive. Here we are. This is during COVID. You can see if you zoom in, all the staff are wearing masks and protective equipment. None of the human beings with disabilities are the same, protected, right? So we've got this idea, remember in COVID? Well, at least it's only affecting the elderly and people who are already essentially on death's door. So we're essentially saying people are disposable and it's okay, right? It's only. We see people as objects or subhumans. They become like, well, they're not fully human. I know someone who had his teeth pulled at Orient because he was biting himself. He didn't feel pain, according to the people that did that. Aristotle himself in BC said, as to exposure and rearing children, let there be a law that no deformed child shall live. So people are throwawayable. They can be tied to beds. They can be called slots. They can be called billable hours. They can be called anything but their name, right? We've got code words that we use to dehumanize people, clients, customers, individuals. How do we get to the point where people are known by their name and fully human? Oh, they also do these weird things like, here's a horse therapy program because horses understand them better than people do. Or here's some dog therapy programs because people relate to dogs better than they do with people, right? All this is not horrible, but it's part of this kind of like weird story that we keep telling. People are seen as ridiculous or silly. So I talked about how we used to dress people up as clowns and take them to nursing homes to entertain people. Not really valuing them, setting them up into a place where they can really step up. Go ahead. And then we talk about the eternal child. They have a mental age of 3, mental age of 2, mental age of 12. They're never going to go beyond that. I dressed up as Santa Claus, you know, Kyle bravely said, done with Santa Claus here, right? And we're like, oh, how dare you? All these kids who are 50 years old love it, right? So again, go ahead. We've got this idea that people are stuck with their own kind. And what that means is they are dangerous. They are a burden. We use them to raise money and feel good about ourselves and get with God. We treat them according to one aspect of their identity, which is their disability or their diagnosis. We treat them like they're not even really human. We treat them like little kids. We make fun of them or laugh about them. We don't take them seriously, right? And we group them all together, congregate away from anyone else, segregate. Okay. These are what we think is behind all of this. And the question is, what do you do about that? But I want to stop for a second and just say, you've got to know that that's going on, right? We didn't know. We thought our day program was the bee's knees. We thought that our outing program was awesome. We didn't know that all of that was operating in the background, in our heads, in our program models, how we were reinforcing to the community that those people belong to us. We'll take care of it, not to you. Don't talk about it. Just send us some donations and we'll take care of it, right? So what do we do about all that? You can't do anything about it until you know what's going on. If you don't know what's hurting in the first place. Questions? Is this making sense? Sorry, Sarah, you guys are new, so I'm looking to see. Yeah, thank you. It didn't to me for a long time, by the way. I had to really work at it, but okay, go ahead, Kristen. Yeah. So one of the things we do is just think about this as balancing. Okay, so right now, this is the dominant story. It's where most of the energy goes, most of the money goes, most of the people are paid to operate in, right? And so we've got this little tiny baby of a story that's like something cool. So we got to figure out how to tell this better story so that over the next 500 years, we can slowly shift so that it becomes this way, right? So I started to understand that the more power, energy, and time I spent on telling this old story, it was just boring. That's just the story of the past. And instead, I could be part of telling this new story. Let's tell a new story. So the new story, we told you about Telly volunteering in his neighborhood at his soup kitchen. We told you about Jerry volunteering in his neighborhood. It was revitalizing itself and having cool beer gardens. We told you about Jenny, who was doing some cool yoga festival stuff and baking cookies with her neighbors. And a couple of things that I want to share with you is that specifically when working with Jenny and Telly and help me, Jerry, is you've got two things that you got to help them do broadly. Sorry, that's okay. Oops, go back and one more. We call this putting your best foot forward. So we're thinking about their image. How do we help Jerry show up in the cool neighborhood t-shirt? How do we help him show up so that he doesn't wear a Starfire shirt that brands him? How do we help him dress and wear a cool sport coat? How do we help Jenny show up and be a serious yoga instructor? She took yoga classes for years, right? Before she jumped into hosting a yoga event, so that she knows the vibe. She's part of the place. She dresses like she's part of the place. How do we help, people really step into enhancing their image so that they fit in? So when they show up, people don't see Down syndrome or autism or cerebral palsy or whatever. They see somebody who is cool or like me or part of it, right? The other thing is we help people grow in their competency. So Jenny doing yoga is a great example, right? Jerry has a really cool telescope and he can name a lot about stars. We have to program things about that into his Dynavox machine so that he can talk competently with people about what he knows. Otherwise, they just see his disability and they make all those assumptions. Subhuman, dangerous, burden, they're not real. So all that stuff. We also talked about these loosely a study called social role valorization. You can go on your own journey around it. We can point you the way, but there's 5 steps and we just want to name them. One is to honor existing valued roles, no matter if they're imperfect. So if, for example, somebody's stuck in a special needs only group, we're not taking that away. We're like, okay, well, that's getting you where you are for now, but it's not ideal. It's not the new story that helps somebody build a really good life. So we're going to hold on to it and honor it. The second step is we are going to avoid any new devalued roles, right? So we will never suggest or say, yeah, let's go start a special needs anything, because there's already plenty of that in the world, right? So we don't dig the hole any deeper is my point. Does that make sense? The third step is really critical. We got to provide proof and evidence to the contrary that people only belong in disability-oriented stuff. So we got to show that Jenny can actually go to a regular everyday yoga class, right? We've got to show that she can participate in there. We've got to make sure that she's got the equipment and the clothes and the mindfulness kind of approach to it to be a part of it. Because if we took Jerry to yoga, he'd be like, I hate this.
Say, oh dear.
And if we took Jenny to Jerry's beer parties in his community, she probably would. She doesn't live there though. It's a 30-minute ride away, right? So everything has to be real, and we have to prove that people belong outside of the disability label. Everybody thinks we got to get this new stuff here. I did too. When I first learned, new. We got to get new stuff. There's a lot of pre-work. You actually have to prove that somebody belongs. And sometimes you got to prove it to the person themselves. Sometimes you got to prove it to their family. Sometimes you got to prove it to yourself because you believe that they're limited to just disability stuff. Then you get into new value roles, because what you're trying to do with this evidence to the contrary is to disprove any existing devalued roles. Trying to say, how do we get people to not believe this, start to believe that this is even possible? And then we strengthen and deepen. Thanks, Chris. So how do we get there from here? We think that a lot of it is about addressing the stuckness that we're in. And one of the things that we latched onto as a provider was what we call personalized community projects. And there's 3 versions of this that we'll tell you about. We have told you about, we're going to revisit. It's bringing people out while keeping your day program going, because it pays the bills. Catalyzing connections in the community, which is not asking people to stay in segregated experiences. And lastly, empowering families and neighborhoods. I would say on the scale of most radical, like this is the most radical thing we do. And this is the most easiest kind of in the box solution. And then this is kind of like in between. So the Springing Out model, basically everybody that you just saw, Jenny, Jerry, and Telly, were in our day program. So is Sam. She helped sew some stuff for new moms and babies, and she joined a Quilt Guild. All of them were in our day program. So we were able to bill for them 5 days a week
And then we were also able to spring out and bill for them to do one-on-one stuff. So it is financially stable if you're in a day program. This is a good way to start to get some quick wins outside of your day program and not worry about the financial stuff, right? And of course, it's going to get our DODD people to solve all this with billions and billions of dollars, right? Thanks, Ann. And add value and opportunity to people's lives, and it's flexible. So I'll show you that in a second. It can lead to and fill around jobs. So we talked about this. This was our day program ratio, 10-2. We took it down to 5-1. This is probably one of the biggest assumptions that our system's making, at least from what I can tell right now, is everybody thinks that smaller groups is the way to go. But actually, smaller groups are still a compromise. So Jerry, Jenny, Telly, Sam are all still stuck in the group. And they're all missing out on their quilt guilds, their neighborhood, soup kitchen. So we took that down again. So go ahead. And we took it to 9-1. We kept the group in our day program, and then we sprung people out in one-on-one little experience. So the one-on-one was important. It was sacred to us. It was intentional time that we invested in the person's story, right? That was just exploring how can we get Telly connected to his neighborhood? How can we get Jenny connected to the yoga community? So each person got a half a day a week. And then we still use the day program to help them plan these things and to bring in people that would teach about, what they knew about organizing a social media campaign around a neighborhood or teach about yoga. So you can use the day program to actually build some skills and get people to develop some of that competence we talked about, right? Again, not ideal. It's still grouping, congregating people with disabilities, but if it gives you the chance to innovate and to get some explorations for people, go for it. So some of the stories, Michelle started a writing group, Candace started a women's beautification for single moms club, Michael started brewing beer, Doug started being a docent at a museum. All these people were in our day program. The connections model is like, what if people don't have to start in the day program? So this is just the same thing you just saw, but without a day program at all. We built HPC for this, and there's lots of billing, but a lot of people are still using HPC in a group, which to me is super disappointing because that could be used to start these kinds of stories. Again, the one-to-one stuff, sacred, personalized versus groups. Joe started a historical reenactment. Robbie started a bike ride in his community. Craig started a science festival. And then our family and neighborhood leadership model is where we started saying, what if we didn't have any staff at all? And we gave family micro grants to go out and do cool things in their neighborhood. So Kristen, families got $1,000. They got mentors each month from our staff. And then they started to develop their own stories. Carol sewed with her neighbors that you saw on the last slide. Nithya started a hip hop arts day and then also started affirming her community during COVID. Kyle started an annual bird retreat and is part of the Audubon Society. Troy and his family started a pop-up dog park in their neighborhood. Ashley and her family started planting Christmas trees with their neighbors, and Arnessa and her family launched a neighborhood bike ride. So 3 outcomes we're looking for: identity beyond disability, connections, and to heal a culture. So let's go next. In the identity, you're looking around what in addition to and beyond disability can we add to this person's identity? And we're always exploring what lights a person up. Like I said, Jerry lives in this place, Jenny lives in this place. Place matters, right? Secondly, what the person's dispositions, what their history is, what their family looks like, all these things help contribute to emerging identities. And who do we meet in the community that has something in common with them? All of a sudden, because Sarah and I talk and we have something in common, then we can start to develop more aspects of my identity, your identity, right? Develop new connections next. So the connections are as many as possible. Let's go to the next one. Look at this. Here's the deal. You want as many of these other citizens as you possibly could get, because over time, you want to place a bet that some of them are going to become friends. So if you can get 1,000 other citizens connected to a person with a disability, the chances are that they would have more than 2 friends go up. But when you're starting with 3, the chances that they have more 2 friends, not very high, right? So it's all about as many connections as possible to see who advances. And then this one, biggest lesson we learned, it's not disability that's a problem, it's our culture and how it makes life hard for people with disabilities. So we have to figure out how to heal culture. That's a big task. And we need new colleagues. So one of our questions is, what if people with disabilities themselves are our colleagues? What if they're not the objects of our work? What if we're not just sitting around saying, how do we make Tim less disabled? Or how do we support Tim in doing something in his community? Well, how do we actually consider Tim as a member of the team of his community, making his community better? Then Tim gets the same value, but also heals the community. So we talked about the cure for culture is a creation of a better culture. And we talked about this is the bad culture. So you're constantly trying to figure out how do we create a better culture than this? And the way we do that is through looking at the trauma, I kind of look at the trauma lens, that our culture is traumatized. It's hurt culture. And it is traumatizing. It is hurting people with disabilities. In particular, we found some evidence that people with the birth of a child with a disability was listed as a traumatizing adult experience. And so if you live with shame of being born or having a child that was born differently, then you are automatically entered into a traumatizing life, right? So we're starting to think about how do you decrease people feeling shame and turning violence inward on themselves or outward on other people. And so the healing factors for trauma is to be around other people, and know your strengths, orient toward gifts, invest in rhythms, give you a sense of future, and then create sensory rich memories that build into you. This time we were together, we were good, I was affirmed, I was around people, right? So go ahead, one more. So the way we heal is all of these projects. Boom, 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 boom. And then asks us to change. Let's stop for a second, go back one more. What we're saying is people with disabilities are the answer to the trauma they're experiencing. And we, as providers and assistant people, have a ton of opportunity through all the hours that we spend with people to actually do things that contribute to this healing. But oftentimes we get stuck in those old assumptions, and then all of that opportunity is wasted. Okay. So we have to change. We say you have to let go of the old story, bring forth the new one. We have to let go of caretaking as our sole goal and step into connecting. So in Cachelle's story, she started as a person who was kicked out of a day program. She ended up becoming the Community Visionary of the Year award winner. We connected her to her neighbors. They made that happen, not us. We have to let go of the faith of the system as the only place where goodness and safety happens. And we have to start wondering who is going to be there when we're not. And that some of these people will be the people that provide safety, job leads, job supports, good chances to chug a beer, whatever it might be. We had to let go of the idea that our buildings were the place to do the work and that it was actually neighborhoods. A neighborhood, a building, same shape. We just have to figure out how to extend ourselves beyond the four walls. And we realized that inclusion shouldn't even have an address. It had to live in all these different places where people were. We stepped in away from fixing people and we started to study new kind of like professional development goals, mindfulness, trauma-informed care, reflective writing, design thinking, empathy, improv, restorative arts. It was really cool, but it's a different way of thinking about yourself as a provider and thinking about how you learn how to network a community versus how you learn to sit around by yourselves with a person with a disability or take them out by yourself to Arby's or something. We have to stop thinking of people as clients and start thinking of them as citizens, people who have responsibilities for culture, right? And think of them as community builders themselves. We had to think about what are we doing beyond the 9 to 5? How do we even take our work home? We'll talk about that today, okay? And how do we stop defining what's going to happen and allow something to happen itself? So this is a path plan for Joe. It took 2 years, but Positive Impossible 2013, meaning this would have been done in 2011. And in 2013, Joe started his first annual historical reenactment, which he just had his 10th this year. The whole group of history nerds know and care about Joe now, which is a good thing or a bad thing, depending on how you think about history. Go ahead, Kristen. We have to stop thinking about people as consumers of our hours and start to think of them as creators and innovators. Alex told us that. She is an innovator in the way that she lives. She is a creator. She's not just an artist. She's also an artist, but it's a creative way of getting around that we need to really pay attention to. We have to figure out how to stop accepting delegation for a person's whole life. Instead, start to think about intentional limitations. So at Starfire, we really started to really shrink our geography around neighborhoods just in Cincinnati. And we had to start thinking about the time that we use. That's why we went from the day program, 40 hours a week, to 3 hours that were really intentional and really building more time so that people could get jobs and get out of our building. And speaking of, we stopped thinking about 40 hours as the goal. We started wondering what would be there in 40 years. So we're investing in the long haul. In order to do that, we got to step past judgment and cynicism and fear. And we got to start thinking about how do we learn new things? How do we get mentors that are in our corner? How does leadership step up? How do we create a conversational culture? How do we tell better stories? And how do we maybe take the next 10, 20 years to do this work?
Okay,
Yeah.
so.
This is new stuff, by the way.
Before you go, that one word say ask takers.
It did.
Sure.
Well, I think it's important. You have to consider that this has not been done. It's not been done in Fairfield County. It's not been done in Lancaster. It's not been done in Pickerington. It's not been done in Ohio. We are on the precipice, the cusp of doing something that's never been done in the history of the world. And that means that we got to be ass kickers. And that means we need ass kickers on our team. I think Alex is an ass kicker. I think Telly and Sam and Robbie and everybody you just saw and their families are ass kickers. Get up every day in a place that says, here's the menu, one thing, and they live creatively and amazingly outside of that menu. And that to me is ass kicking.
So these are just some things that we've come up with over time as we were working with people to make those connections and meeting people, like, where do you start? What do you do with your time? So if you are going to go out one-on-one, what the heck? Like, what do you do with those few hours each week? So the first thing, you can advance there. So this is just sort of a cylinder. It may be hard to read, but at the top are sectors of community life. So in each one, so we've got friends, community, neighborhood, social justice, learning, work, home and family, spiritual and religious, exercise and leisure, and creative expression. So one, just to give you that chance, if you're going to think about a person and get to know them, what do you know about them? Maybe they're already involved in their church. Maybe they don't go to church, right? Like, everybody's going to be very different, but to think about those parts of people's worlds and where you could invest, what you know about them that maybe they are most curious about. It's not easy. Pam and I were talking about, like, well, what do you want to do today? Like, that's a terrible question. Like, that's just impossible to answer. One, to Alex's point, you've been given a menu with very limited choices. So when you open up the world, I'm overwhelmed and I have no idea where to start. So to look at a person and say, like, oh, you know, I've noticed you do like to draw. Because most of the answers I've gotten throughout time are, well, I like bowling, art, and music, or eating out, right? Like, it's right, which is pretty typical of what people have been offered, which doesn't always, but maybe they are really into art. So you've got to explore that a bit. So we'd spend some time in discovery. Some people, like Jenny, was already very involved in her church. And then it was like, well, what could we do? Maybe not me, but talking with her family who are still involved with her life about what you could do and do a little differently, or to, again, find that valued role within church. So now she's formally she's a formal greeter, she's got the name tag, and she's on the social action committee, right? So there's things that people can do and step in. But just to kind of look at all those sectors to kind of think through where would be a good first place. Eating out is not necessarily in there, right? As a category, it's a motivator for a lot of us.
Century rich memory.
It's a motivator, but to think about that. And then those again are just those healing factors of being together around gifts. So what is somebody really good at? what have you noticed? And how can you bring that forth wherever you go and highlight for the people you're introducing them to? Investing in rhythms, so having something that can happen monthly or weekly, annually even, but hopefully there's some things in between, and sensory rich. So those are just some of the things that we kind of keep in mind, and just to have almost as a tool to use and think about, like, well, okay, for this person, okay, well, we found the cool dance class in your neighborhood. The other thing that's not on here, but we've talked about, is being neighborhood, and Alex she said, like, well, if it's an hour away, how am I gonna get there? So the more that we were focused on one person, we could really be logistical about, like, well, here I am in this neighborhood versus starting from Starfire's building, which is 30 minutes away from their home. So if we're thinking about that, right, like, to really be geographically aware, like, you live here, we should find things that are closer to your neighborhood, because then there's overlap. The
You
other.
have a tool with this, send.
Yeah, I can send to Pam and she can send it out. Yeah, so those are just sort of just some big ideas and big categories, but it can kind of help you think through, like, oh, you really like that Zoom, you've done Zoom, but we've done yoga, maybe we should find one in your neighborhood or whatever. The other tool that we have, or you can, oh, go ahead. Skip it. Are the 4 commitments. So these were designed with the families that were doing the projects as somewhat of I think we've called them guardrails, just things to keep in mind. So discovering your community's gifts, not fixing what's wrong. So every project, every effort was just highlighting what the person did well. Sam could sew. Who knew, right? We would never have put 10 sewing machines in our day program, but we could go to a local sewing shop and she can sew. And she's pretty good at it, right? At the same time, she makes mistakes, but she handles them well. Like, she just rips it out. But we're not at the same time, right? At the same time, I'm not developing a safety curriculum for Sam, right? Because she would be too nice to strangers or anything like that. We're looking for what the strengths are and how we can highlight them. Creating something that belongs to you and your neighborhood, not to anyone else. So this is unique to Sam. Like, if we're working and talking about one person, it's pretty easy to really make it so that it is just about them and where they belong. One, kind of like we've said, when we started as a small group, we're still a group of people with disabilities, and that just changes the dynamics. It changes the way the world sees it. And we have to be honest about that. As soon as there are more than a person, like one person with Down syndrome, okay, 3, 4 at a party, it changes the dynamics.
I want to say that this is the hardest commitment to make and hold. That this one right here, creating something that belongs to one person with a disability and protecting that like your life depends on it, because their life depends on it. If you're willing to let billing and convenience keep people grouped, you're asking them to make a compromise that will make sure that they never step into the future that they dream of, okay? And people will be weird about it. They'll say, yeah, but that's discrimination. You can't take 4 or 5 people out. You can't tell people with disabilities not to come to Sam's project. You can't tell Jenny not to come. You design it just for Jenny. You design it just for Sam. Otherwise, you're just recreating the very thing that is causing them to lose their identity, lose their personal connections, and lose their opportunity to build a person-centered culture story. Okay? This one's for the ass kickers. And you have to do it. And it's the most counterintuitive thing in our entire system, because our house rules are everybody was welcome. By saying that, we actually aren't being strategic. And you know who's paying the price? It's not me. It's not y'all. Who's paying the price?
Jenny?
Every time.
The next one, grow connections in your community, not recreating old service models. So really focusing on those free people. Like, who are your neighbors? Who are the people that could be in your life? They aren't paid to be there. They are just like we use the word natural support, but that's what we might mean by connection. So, and that's again why if it's the closer to home it is, the more likely that you'll have those overlaps, and you'll see somebody that you volunteered with at church or run into them at the grocery store. And every time they see that person, that's a stronger connection, right? And the more that we can build that in, and what can we do, right? To help grow those connections. focus on joy, not commiseration. It seems simple, but it is not always the way people with disabilities and their families have been brought in, right? To be joyful and to celebrate who they are, who the person with a disability is, and who their family is. So. Okay.
It's out too.
Yes.
And it's just gives you some guardrails. You know that 3 hours a week that I said, if you're in a day program, you spend out 3 hours for each person. This should be your mantra for those 3 hours a week. This is a way to protect yourself from sinking back into the old story. It's a way to protect the person with the disability, their family, from getting into the, oh, we should just do the same old thing, right? This is a way to create a container for innovation.
Those are on my refrigerator at home. Because I use them in life, like I just, they're good things for.
Yeah, we can send you magnets. We have them. Go ahead, Krista. All right, so all that stuff is how to work if you are, let's say, working for the man like we all are, okay? This is for the people who say things like, well, my boss says I can't do that. Or I'm in a union and I'm not allowed to do that. Yeah, or, that's really not in our job description. Okay, we'll hear you out. I think it's possible because we did it, but this next part is for people that say that, and we'll say, great, so take your work home. Okay. This is Peter Block. He lives in Cincinnati. He's an expert in organizational design and community development. This is John McKnight. He's in Chicago. He invented what's called asset-based community development. And that means he looks at what's right with a neighborhood, not what's wrong with it. He looks at what's right with a person, not what's wrong with them. Asset-based, positive thinking, right? This is Judith Snow, one of the amazing advocates and teachers and lecturers and mentors that we've had, passed away in 2015. But they came to Cincinnati, and I remember I was invited to go see him. Peter stood up in front of the crowd first and said, welcome, everybody. They said, I got my friends John and Judith with me. He said, but I want to start off by saying, we tell all these bad stories about ourselves and we don't tell the positive stories. He said, we're always complaining about what's wrong with this community. We don't really celebrate what's right with it. He introduced John. John said, I have a bad heart. He said, it's worth $500,000 to the University of Chicago Medical Center. He said, it's not worth anything to my neighbors and my family. He said, we have entire industries dedicated to making money off of people's problems. And he said, I want you to beware of people who profit off of other people's problems. And I was like, holy shit, John's talking about me. And my feelings were hurt. And then Judith got up there and she said, there's no such thing as disability. She says, how does one word that means one person can't see, one person can't hear, one person needs help thinking through their checkbook, and another person needs a wheelchair or a walker to get around? She said, it's too broad. It defines everybody in a way that limits us from thinking about the person's full personhood. And Judith uses a wheelchair. She's quadriplegic, and she still writes books and does amazing lectures and challenges your thinking, right? So she's walking the talk, so to speak. All three of these people made me mad, hurt my feelings, and I went home and I got John's book, The Careless Society. And then a few years later, John and Peter together wrote The Abundant Community, which we'll talk about, Awakening the Power of Families and Neighborhoods next. So this is interesting. This is Cincinnati, Ohio. And right here is downtown Cincinnati, Ohio. And right here is Kentucky. And this is Bellevue. This is where Bridget and I live. And what's interesting about this is we do all this work over here because that's where Medicaid is for us, right? And then we cross this yellow bridge right here, and we come right here, and we live here. And guess what? We don't bill any Medicaid for here. So one of the things that we found interesting was that, go ahead, we're right across the river from work, and we're wondering over here, we're trying to figure out how do you get neighbors involved in the lives of people with disabilities? And then we come home, and at some point we're like, oh, we're neighbors, but we don't know any people with disabilities. Whoa, we got a gap, right? We got a gap in integrity. So we started to wonder what that would be like to bring our work home with us. John and Peter wrote The Abundant Community, and
They asked about 12 people to come to a meeting in Cincinnati, and I was one of them. And they said, would you interview your neighbors and ask them about their gifts and their strengths and their passions? And I was like, that's weird. But we were going to meet with them in a month and tell them how it went. And we all had to commit to how many interviews we could do. And I counted 5 weeks. I said, I can do 5. So I did. I interviewed Bridget first. And I asked her what she cared about. It was awkward because asking somebody what their passions are, even if you're married to them, is a weird question, right? And you feel a little insecure about it. But I told John McKnight I was going to do it. So I did it. And Bridget told me, well, I like to garden sometime. She had other things too she was passionate about, me in particular. But so I said, okay, thanks, Bridge. Great interview. I asked Christine in the green shirt, and she says, yeah, I'll interview you. I'll let you interview me. Christine served beer at the bar where my terrible band played all those years. So I knew Christine. She lived a few doors over. So Christine, what are you interested in? She's interested in art. She was also interested in how could the kids of our community have a local source of free, fresh food. I was like, I don't know, I'll talk to Bridge. She's interested in a community gardener like that. So then my next one was with Steve, and he was on city council, and I interviewed him. And he's interested in Republican politics and awesome guitar and gospel music and Catholic faith and computers, but he's also on city council. So I tell him about this idea that Christine and Bridget had, like food and stuff. He's like, oh yeah, the city owns tons of space in Bellevue. He said, I can help you make a request to use their land. Turns out one plot of land is right behind Christine's house. He says, I said, who else should I talk to, Steve? He says, talk to Tom. He's the former mayor. He knows all the people on the garden committee. I talked to Tom. Tom connects me to the entire garden committee. And I had one more interview to go. And I was sitting in my office at Starfire over in Ohio, and the phone rang, and a woman said, hi, I have 2 sons with Down syndrome. So I'd like to sign them up for Starfire. And I said, okay. I said, well, I want to get out because it's Friday afternoon. I said, what's your name? I'll send you some stuff. So she gives me her name. I said, what's your address? She says, oh, it's in Bellevue. I was like, oh, I live in Bellevue. So I said, how about I don't send you anything and we have coffee in the morning? So Mitch and his mom, Cindy, and I got coffee the next morning. And turns out that Mitch is getting a job at the garden center up the hill. And he lives about 3 blocks from Christine and Bridget and I, because Bellevue's only a square mile. So Bridget and Mitch and Christine and some other people started a community garden class at the Civic Garden Center. And that was 2011, I think.
Whatever.
And this is what they did with it. They started a free food after the harvests. There's a kid with a disability in this picture. There's a kid with a disability in this picture. There's 2 brothers who are part of Special Olympics in this picture. Bridge started taking the school up to garden every week. And we didn't stop. We started engaging with our schools. We held sessions to think about how to get more neighbors involved in the schools because we're a failing school system. We're in the 20th percentile. And we thought, well, that's probably not an administration problem. It might be a community problem. So we started to develop things that would get more people engaged. We decided to host monthly potlucks. We'll have our next one in December. They've been going on for 10 years. We started to do community art projects where one family decided to paint the crosswalks at a busy intersection by the school. Bridget started a community art project where they painted the big old ugly concrete garbage cans. One neighbor turned his his alley into an art gallery. And once a month he hosts a big art party there. One neighbor started building little free libraries. There's now 22 in 1 square mile of Bellevue. This, one of the libraries is in the yard of a family with a disability. There's a person with a disability in this picture. There's a kid on the spectrum in this picture. Person with a disability is in this picture. And a family of a person with a disability was usually the ones before they moved who would say the blessing to open up all the potlucks. Thanks. We started front yard movie nights. We started derby parties. We had Tuesday night men's group. We had one block party and we asked the person to teach how to start block parties. And now we got like 6 of them. There's a person with autism that keeps winning the derby party. There's a kid with autism in this picture. There's 2 siblings with disabilities in this picture, and their people with disabilities who show up to these. Next. We bought a plot of land 5 doors down. We started a cornhole tournament for our neighborhood. We started Easter egg hunts for the kids. There's a kid on the spectrum in this picture. We ended up hiring neighbors to do murals there. We had bonfires there. Bridget getting struck out by Spider-Man there. We built a little pavilion. We had a history of our street there, getting neighbors to talk about who's lived there and how long. We had a neighbor teach paella. Right? So the idea is that we just started to understand that by connecting with our neighbors, we were actually to create a culture in our community where there were lots of things for anybody with a disability or their family to show up and be a part of. So we're going to plan that today. Okay.
Okay. So part of John McKnight and the Abundant Community and Peter, one of the things in Tim's interviews was kind of trying to figure out what are people's talents, interests, passions, and skills. So tips is the shortcut to that. And it's gifts of the head, gifts of the heart, and gifts of the hand, right? So what do you think? What do you know? What do you care about? And what can you actually do? So we want to give you guys the chance to kind of get a little interview practice with each other. You can go to the next one. So we've got some of these questions just to give you some to start with. You'll break up into pairs, and seriously just pairs, because we're probably gonna cut some time off of that. So for real, this 2 people. So as pairs, and these are just some questions you can start with. So what is something you're naturally really good at? What have you learned? What do you do well? What do you care deeply about? And what do you know well enough you could teach others? So those are some. Somebody we know well had who does a lot of story collecting and there's always a follow-up question. That is his advice, right? So if you're a good listener and you're tuning in, there's always a follow-up question as people share. So these are just a few to get you started. It's not a checklist. If you don't answer them all, that's okay. But have that conversation and, think about like, what's the follow-up? How can you find out more about why that matters to that person or why they brought that up? So take some notes because we are going to put what you learn about each other. We're going to keep that rolling into the next activity. So find your partner and maybe 5 minutes each.
Yeah.
I think, is that enough? Or should it be less? Where are we?
5 minutes each.
Okay.
That's right, except for half an hour.
I know, right? Like, okay, find your partner.
And interview them.
Oh,
As many gifts as you can.
okay.
Just until the top of the hour. We got about 20 more.
All right.
I'm gonna rearrange my next meeting if I need it.
I know. Do you understand what we're working on today?
So you may-
Yeah. All right, so I don't.
Ready?
Sure.
I'll interview.
Okay, all right.
Oh, for the. We're just.
Not what I'm doing, no. I am trying really hard. This is all good. I mean, the Peter Brock stuff I've known about. Well, okay, so what was I going to do? This is horrible. I want to become so my goal is as soon as I return.
Right now, you still are?
It's to write the book. And I do it right now in ways that I can, but I feel like I have a much bigger role in doing that if I can. So, I was the person who has lived in my community. Performances never, right? My family has a street. business owners, officials, so from some degrees carrying on tradition of us. Absolutely. But then other people, why I'm so interested, some wrap up on this is that. Man, I started looking at. That's what I said. Well, she wants to come back, we can say it Saturday when I graduated. We would have loved your vision. We've got the developmental center, we've got it.
So that's when you're part of it.
Residential.
Yes.
You can leave. And so even if it's starting to bringing that route to an event, like then we can move towards, all right, great. All right, well, let's pinpoint that person and connecting them with that whatever's in there. But I can't get that. And it's funny because I did a training. Basics. But it was that data, and the director became my director. So like, you know, did back and we did a specific training about being for direct smart. And we were trying to because the whole, like, we don't know. Our American people was so excited. And when you get the local news, just. Oh, yeah.
We're about halfway there, so if you're doing one at a time, you might need to switch.
Anybody call you like, you know, what else?
So, yeah, I didn't answer any of your questions.
So I heard it.
It's that personal life. Like our minutes this week. I'm 2 years from the time. My husband.
What are you doing? What do so what do you do? Do you guys or?
Let me say, like, sleep dogs. They're just something that I see music. Or no, it's just like. Hey, so when he goes like. That was one of my goals. I want to turn away. All this.
Okay, thank you. Straight out this door and you'll take a right. Through the hallway. Gosh, yeah, yeah. You'll see the sign as soon as you walk out there, the men's sign, yeah.
Cool, well, I guess we have to talk about this a little bit before. I want to know more.
So what are you?
Yes.
I'm going to do something.
I think we know things you're not really good at. I'm really glad that I. What we wanted to over the next years, right? And one of my biggest goals was figuring out how what do we need to work on? The directs are professionals and those interested in this field, whether those are students, whether that's somebody calls us and says, I don't use some providers.
No, I think recently, your system.
Okay, got about one more minute.
They were both. I want to create a training.
I was thinking,
So I'm glad we're doing, yeah, he's not like, I know we're doing training. Yeah. In fact, we participated with lots of stuff. And I mean, so many more kids, it's been a.
And it didn't have-
Exactly.
It was easy to conversation his thing.
I like learning.
It's the typing.
Surprise.
I know, I like. You know, snag one of these. Yeah, I've never met you. Sarah, I've seen emails from you and stuff, and I'm Kristen Thorne, and I was like. Email that I received.
So go ahead and
Like, I
take
never.
that conversation.
Love those surprises.
Do you want to do the matchup? Instruction? I'm gonna skip that.
Okay, all right.
Okay, so you guys can stay with your partner if you want, and we're gonna jump into the next, we're gonna take it to the next level, right?
All
Go
right.
ahead.
So let's go one
Yes,
more.
do that.
What we're gonna do is we're taking the next 10 minutes. And we are going to design a project. Now, here's the rules. It has to include the gifts of everyone in your group. So there's gonna be 4 and 4. Okay, so there will be 2 groups. You're designing one community project that's gotta happen somewhere in those spaces that y'all named to feel alive. Or you can invent a new space, okay? We're looking for something outside the box, all right? So the best one I ever heard was a group of 7th graders that one person loved cats and one person loved fireworks and one person loved the Olympics and one person loved competition. And they invented the Cat Olympics and they had a big fireworks thing at the end of it. It's pretty amazing. They didn't actually do it, so we're not actually gonna do this, but be thinking about those 4 commitments, right? So it's not based on somebody's problems. We're not gonna sit around and commiserate with each other about why other people are ruining our lives. We're not gonna create the new disability-oriented special needs thing, right? And we're also gonna figure out how do we lean into gifts? How do we really lean into this? And also just kind of think about those healing things, right? That we want a rhythm, we want patterns, we want ongoing things, we want things that feel sensory rich. We want things that have people connected to each other on a regular basis, reminding each other of their goodness, okay? So you've got exactly, now I wait 1 minute, 9 minutes.
Class.
9 minutes to design your invitation. You're drawing a poster. This is your big old welcome to the thing, okay? So, and we can, yeah, where you guys had number there? All right, you guys over there? Us guys over here? Bridget's gonna time us and we gotta present it in 9 minutes.